Hi everyone, and welcome to the Hub and Spoken Special, a 6-part series where we have curated some of the awesome discussions we've had over the last 100 episodes. As data and analytics is really in its infancy, and so many people are trying to find their way still, we've always aimed to create a platform for us and our guests to open up and share real-life stories about delivering value from data, have frank and honest discussion about what works and what doesn't, and represent what we at Cynozure and the CDO Hub see as vital topics for organizations to engage in. So this special series celebrates and showcases those discussions, the amazing guests we've had, and the brilliant content we've shared. Each of the 6 episodes in this series focuses on a specific topic: data strategy or data management, business value, data platforms, data leadership, and finally, leading with purpose. It was incredibly hard to decide what to include from previous episodes, as there's been so many amazing things said by so many people. We hope, though, that we've represented this topic well and that it resonates with you all. This is part 2 of the series, Unlocking Business Value and Excellent Data Management and Data Governance. In this episode, we shine a light on the critical topic that has the power to make or break not only the work organizations do around delivering smart insights and analytics, but on the very operational activities that enable business to trade, charities to raise money and help others, governments to serve, and hospitals to care for people. Your ability to collect, manage, and get value from data is predicated on data excellence. And in this episode, we speak to some great guests from the show on that topic. In this first clip from episode 97, I spoke with Anthony Roscoe, the Director of Enterprise Data Governance at Highmark Health, about the convergence of good data governance with analytics. We joined the conversation when touching on the balance required to capture, manage, and exploit data for the benefit of clinicians and patients, and how to do that in a way that is ethical. In such an important sector that looks after the health and well-being of individuals, it's of course critical that the bar for good data quality is high. Anthony helps to explain how they are approaching this.
So first of all, I think there's a real balance between speed and decision-making and decision rights. For instance, as an organization, we have all of this data and we are expected to be custodians and good keepers of it. Again, whether that be by regulation or even, at the basis of the Hippocratic Oath for healthcare, do no harm. Why have, if we have this data, are we using it in the appropriate ways to benefit our members and our patients? And it's really important, and we take that to heart. I mean, we base our decisions foundationally upon regulations and standards and policies that are in place. But we are also looking at it from an ethical perspective and saying, just because I can do something, should I do it? Yeah. And does it match the values of our organization? And I think that, if you talk to any member of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, they will say there is definitely a culture that pervades all of the licensees around this. I think that, again, with the hospital systems that are now part of our organization, there was a culture there as well. And blending that together, we approach what we're doing in a way that says, okay, if we're going to create this engine to learn about the behaviors of our members and patients, how do we best ensure that we have a broad data set that's representative, that we are eliminating bias and treating that well? And again, just at the heart of all of the discussions, bringing data sets together, should we do that just because we can? And those can be very difficult conversations. They can be rather challenging in the aspects of someone saying, well, this data set's publicly available. Why should it matter that I bring it in and start merging it with other data that we already have? And there can be, very pure, clean reasons to do that wouldn't make anyone raise an eyebrow. But, there are other scenarios that I can think of, not that I know these aren't things that are happening, but I can think of that would make me very concerned, both as a consumer, but also as someone charged with, running this program and, again, making sure we're doing the right things with our data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those controls, those guardrails are important, I guess, to make sure that not only you're doing the right thing, but that it's done in a way that continues to kind of ensure it doesn't sort of, you don't lose control over it, and it doesn't, get out of control, and that the focus is always on the thing that you mentioned before about the experience of the clinician, of the members, of the patient. Are there certain topics that are more important, do you think, in terms of that kind of idea of managing and governing data in a positive way to drive benefit? Are there sort of some certain areas within the kind of overarching framework of data governance that are most important to you?
I think right now there's a big shift as we recognize the impact on health that social determinants have. And when we start talking about that data set, or expanding that data set, or even asking more questions around socioeconomic status, and linking that to both treatment patterns and outcomes and other disease patterns, we start to recognize that, again, you want to take extra care. You want to be absolutely aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because if you start asking your members to list race or ethnicity more often, or you're trying to consume that because you're looking to do good with it, it can be perceived that it's not the appropriate use. And so looking at that and creating policies and standards around how you treat that, and then treat that data, and then also, just because you have that data, not everybody gets to use it. Everybody wants to use it. I can almost guarantee you that. And they say, well, it's a corporate asset. Why can't we use it? Well, because we have these underlying standards. We have these underlying ethical codes that we recognize we need to bring to bear when we make these decisions, when we approach using the data. And it puts it into stark contrast about, I know a lot of industries and a lot of areas talk about data democratization and self-service analytics. And the speed that you gain from those and the agility that you gain from those can be rather impressive and lead to great innovation. And by no means do we want to stifle innovation, but at the same time, it doesn't lend itself, unless you have that good culture and that ethical basis in your practices as an organization, to say, well, we've given everyone access, and we're not watching or we're not controlling. Yeah. And so you have to find that balance, because I don't believe any organization intentionally hires a bad actor, but that happens. And I think that, our organization is very focused on these positive outcomes and really changing. We want to create remarkable experiences. And I can tell you the remarkable experience of hearing that someone did something poor with your data is not the type that we want to have. And so it's part of our culture to look at it in terms of, how am I helping?
In this next clip, we turn to the inimitable Susan Walsh, aka the classification guru and author of the book Between the Spreadsheets. In recent years, Susan has focused her efforts on helping organizations to create better quality data and has designed frameworks and best practices to do so. From this chat from episode 53, we talked through the approach needed to fix dirty data from the point of capture to the point of usage, and her COAT methodology that helps you do that.
So is there an approach to fixing dirty data that people can subscribe to?
Well, the first thing is always start with the end in mind. So what do you want to achieve from the data? What do you want to report on? What is the information that you want to get out of the data? And then look and see if you have that information in your data. If you don't know how much you're spending on office supplies, you could classify it and then you would find out. But if it's something like you want to know how many office supply, like each type of office supply, and you don't have that in your invoice description, it's not going to be possible to give you that. But what you could do is speak with your supplier and moving forward start to get that detail so that you could classify that in the future.
Sort of identify the gap and
try
and plug that gap.
And then when you start, I think most of the time it's going to be multiple people that are working on data, and a lot of the time it's not just going to be people who are data scientists or analysts. It could just be procurement people, salespeople, the receptionist. So you want to make sure, again, that they understand the responsibility of the information that they're putting in and what's going to happen to it. Mm-hmm. And you want to give them a way of recognizing and remembering that's familiar and easy and not too intimidating. Mm-hmm. So that's where I came up with quote. So I say, make sure your data's got its quote on. Okay. And what that means is that, first of all, your data has to be consistent. So we talked a little bit about that, liters and grams and things like that. Are we spelling it all the same way? How are we inputting that information? Are you filling in every box like you should be? Minimum order quantities, are you doing it properly? Mm-hmm. You should know that, we would never have a minimum order quantity over or under this number. There's probably a number there that you would know it would not be acceptable.
Yeah.
Then it needs to be organized. So like your wardrobe, I don't know about yours, mine's is really messy. I know I've got lots of nice tops in there, but I can't find the one I want. Yep. If I had that wardrobe in a nice order with all my tops in one section, even by colour, and then my trousers and my dresses, it would be so much easier to find. And it's the same with data. So organise it, categorise it into groups, but you could look at it by department or by product owner or by the team leader. I mean, there's a number of different ways you could categorize your data and help you. GL codes are useful, but not to be trusted completely, I would say. Right. Sometimes GL codes can be projects rather than products or services. So
yes, I guess that comes back to how you've implemented your finance system and how you use GL codes. But yeah.
So use that. Then it has to be accurate. Basic level means it has to be right. Yep. So how you get to that right, and you have to agree standards on what right is for your business. Because business A might find it acceptable to not have a postcode in their data, but business B might be like, well, that's completely unacceptable. So agree what those accurate standards are, make sure everyone's on the same page. And then once you have that consistency, that organization and the accuracy, you can finally have trustworthy data. And that means that that when you file it out for people to do analytics reports and make decisions on, that it's as good as it can be. I would never claim that you could get your data 100% accurate, but by following those rules, you can get it as close as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Good data management and data governance doesn't happen in a silo. Whilst acceptable to be led by an individual or specific team responsible, the work and the impact of data management and data governance is pervasive across an organization. In episode 98, I picked up with Scott Harrison from Parkland Hospital about how he was dealing with this. He talked through the value in building relationships with stakeholders, the need to build trust, and why it's important to align the work around data management to the key priorities and important metrics of the business.
Yeah, we have a very, very close working relationship with key stakeholders across Parkland. And so, really, our organization is matrixed across, we've got EVPs, SVPs, and then, our service level kind of directors. And we all kind of tend to roll up under, one of the EVPs at Parkland, and each one are in charge of certain strategic priorities. And so I think being able to identify those key strategic priorities and then who rolls up underneath each group, and then identifying programs that are important to those key priorities is kind of key. And then those priorities have goals associated with them that are measured, that are reported back to, our county board of directors, which is who funds Parkland. As a state county entity, it's not like we generate money and live off of our profits. It's, a lot of our funding comes from, county tax dollars or charity care or some type of, donation or of that type. So, we really have to be very, very targeted with what we're taking on from an initiative standpoint. And so those priorities have goals that get reported. So the data that these programs are run by is very, very critical. And so I think being able to establish those relationships early on in the COVID pandemic started just kind of building upon itself over the past maybe 18 months to where those leaders that are in charge of the service lines understand the value that we can provide with our tools and our products. And so rather than it becoming a reactionary, oh no, I need to report these numbers to the board, it's been more proactive in that now we're able to see what's coming down the pike so we can plan better. We're not caught flat-footed with a lot of requests because we know that each one of these priorities have goals associated with them. So we can assign our team members to work with those key stakeholders to get everything fleshed out.
Yeah, at least then that the requests that are coming in are linked nicely back to, as you say, a goal and a priority. And have you found that there's been a big learning curve on the site, your business counterparts in terms of how they can use data, how they can use insights, the way they interact with you, the technology, your team?
Yeah, we actually, and that's a good question. Because everybody, tends to request what's seen right in front of their face. The command center, when we opened it during the initial phases of the COVID response, we built a big dashboard that essentially ran all of our command center operations. Right. Had a lot of key metrics across the hospital that showed, areas of impact with metrics. And so early on in the pandemic, everybody that was coming, to us was saying, hey, I need a dashboard. Not everybody needs a dashboard, as you know. Some things are tabular based reports. Some of it, we've got these sophisticated EMRs you can log into if that's where you spend the bulk of your day. It's about meeting your customers where they are and developing business personas around what their needs are. Mm-hmm. And so that's really where we started focusing on, who was that customer, what were they asking for, and what was the best tool to provide them, so that we weren't just consistently building dashboards when, a lot of times that isn't what was needed. Yeah. So it's really about really understanding the business persona and helping drive that value with the products that they are requesting.
Interesting. And have they started to put their own kind of initiatives in place to ensure that the rest of that department or people that interact with that strategic priority are sort of raising their understanding, their game in how data is used?
Yeah, they're, it's still a little bit in the infancy phase. So we're moving in the right direction though. So we're starting the conversations, at a higher level, and those are beginning to matriculate down to the lower level operational staff that are actually executing to these goals, right? Mm-hmm. The idea is that we want to implement something and then measure how effective that program is performing. And so we haven't gotten to the level where we're actually executing to create that feedback loop. But all the pieces are in place. So that's the nice thing, is that, we feel like we've built the right type of trust within the organization as it relates to the data. Now we're just looking at, how are we going to be able to consistently operationalize our, to meet these goals so that we can, create that feedback mechanism and understand that what we're doing is effective. And that's, I don't have any answers, but all the early signs are we put the right pieces in place.
An episode on good data management wouldn't be complete without the data whisperer himself, Scott Taylor. Such a brilliant, motivating voice in the data management space. Scott is the author of the book Telling Your Data Story, which looks at data storytelling for data management. In this clip from episode 30, I talked to Scott about the thinking behind creating master data, where the ownership lies to manage it, and why, despite the fact that people have been trying to do good master data management forever, there is still a strong need to get this right in support of the business operations and analytics work organizations really want to do.
I mean, everybody's got some form of master data. Some of it's just terrible.
Mm.
So, and that peaks out in all kinds of different ways when you can't get a top account report ready for your national accounts people because it took 150 emails and, you know, this region didn't report right and this one's missing data, and you slam all that stuff together. That's because the master data, part of the problem is the master data structure isn't there and it's not pervasive enough, because those kinds of things should take moments to do rather than days or weeks to do. They shouldn't be a chore. They should be the way you operate your business. Good quality insight, well-structured, trusted insight and data about your key relationships is the fuel for any company.
Yeah. Why do people find this so hard? Well, do people find it hard, I suppose, is the first better question.
Yeah, they find it hard. It's, you know, MDM and master data isn't new.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talked to an enterprise the other day because I'm doing some work with kind of internal consulting with some of these enterprises to help them discover their own data story, if you will, so they can pitch it to their own management, so I can be sort of a strategic sounding board for some of these folks. So talk to this gentleman, and he said that IT owned MDM forever at their company, and it's failed 3 times. And he's trying to create literally the 4th time. And I said, well, let me guess why it failed. So no business support, lack of definitions, IT owned the project, didn't really show immediate value. I said, am I hitting some buttons? He said, you're checking all the boxes. So there's kind of classic, you know, if it was a new thing, there'd be some buzz around it and some heat around it. But in a lot of cases, it's the 3rd or 4th, or, you know, who knows how many times they've taken a crack at this, and people get weary of it.
Yeah.
And so doesn't have a great rep in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And I like to talk actually about master data as the deliverable. So however you get there, you get there. But you need the end result. And when you talk about data governance too, an end result of that is a tangible asset called master data for the organization.
Yeah.
And what's nice is today, I think those gaps are starting to be closed a little bit. People are realizing the kind of work they want to do, whether it's digital transformation, IoT, AI, data science, name whatever the coolest thing is. They're starting to realize that those engines don't turn over when they put the key in, because the right fuel is not in the car. And that fuel, again, coming back, whatever analogy you want to use, that's the master data is absolutely part of it.
And yeah, I think so. That sort of we've talked about that sort of it being foundational. It's the underpinning. Is there a danger that we overplay this? That you know, there's lots of other things. We do a lot of work in data strategy, and a lot of what we talk about is not actually data. It's processes, it's skills, it's culture, it's organizational design, it's the methodology that you have between different teams, it's knowing which direction you're going, it's knowing where you're trying to get to, it's knowing what use cases from a business point of view you're implementing, it's knowing which parts of the business strategy you want to contribute to or impact. Isn't that more important than master data?
I don't think we have to rank any of those. Those are all important, right? They're all part of it. But at the end of that proverbial day, you need to deliver something.
Yeah.
And that's part of that something is insight that drives the business, data that drives the business. And you have to get the culture right. You have to get the strategy right. You have to get all those other things right. I'm not downplaying them at all. But if you just do that and you haven't created foundational data for your organization, then you actually haven't done those other things, have you?
No, quite.
So, you know, there's got to be some tangible asset there. Whether you monetize it, whether you put it on the books, you know, there's a whole set of thinking around data as an asset and so on. It's probably the topic of another podcast even. But still, you know, I like to talk about putting your data to work. Put your data to work. Let's not talk about managing it so much. Let's talk about the work it gets done. Yeah. And again, that's tangible. Business people see that. A salesperson who becomes really data driven, trusts the data they get from their organization, builds new and interesting relationships, that kind of stuff starts to catch on. Hey, how come he's making his number much faster and it seems easier? Because he's not spending all his time collecting stuff. He trusts what he has, or she trusts what she has, and they make those deals and they make those relationships happen. That's what business people want. They want to be able to just push a button, and there's a lot behind that button. And that's where data governance comes in. A lot of things you talked about coming in.
In the final clip, I head all the way back to episode 7, when this podcast was in its infancy. I talked to Roberto Maranca, who at the time was the Chief Data Officer at Lloyds Banking Group. The episode itself covered the change required in order to deliver data governance at scale, but also the area of ethical use and management of data. This clip picks up on the latter, where we were discussing the importance of building trust in your data with external and internal stakeholders, the need to be transparent with what you are doing and why you're doing it. We also touch on the European data protection legislation, GDPR, which was a hot topic and top of mind at the time, about how privacy and consent management plays a role in ethical and legal governance of data.
How we win this and how important it is for us to win this is because trust is going to be the most important value that you want to make sure that you present to your customer, because trust is going to be the difference between growth or a decrease of your income, because trust is going to become more and more important with your customers, and they need to understand that they can trust you with their data. And that's the spirit of GDPR. Really.
Yeah, I wonder if we need a new measure or metric of trust, and work out how we can judge how trustworthy we are. We know we've got some brand sentiment metrics and NPS scores and those sorts of things, but this notion of value exchange between giver of data and provider of service needs to be high. Amazon have got that licked because you're happy to hand over data because the service is so awesome, but in other industries that trust equation is a bit imbalanced, and therefore people may not be quite so open to handing over data quite so easily.
No, and I completely agree. And I think that the imbalance there is between the big corporations having all the machine learning and all the artificial intelligence of the world, and they can do whatever. And the little people, let's say, out there, they're feeling a bit, as an object, if not subject, in a kind of a more of the royal way. So I think responsible.
Do you think people care? Do you think people are their data is being used?
I think there is what I was referring to before. There's a new way of we need to think about segmenting our customers, because there is definitely different perception. I mean, people like me, because I'm old, I'm pre-digital, and I started computer only when I was 20. I've seen my first one. No, probably a bit before that.
So only a couple of years then, Roberto.
Yes. Yeah. So I might have a different perception of the privacy. What is mine data? And whilst people, I can see my almost teenage daughters that I might have a quid pro quo approach, saying, "Well, I'll give you my data if you give me the right service. Why not?" Yeah, it's fine if I'm entering a bar and in my phone the offer of the month of the drink is popping up. Actually, I want that. So there is, I think, as CDO role evolves, we will need to work more and more as strategists to offer to our counterparts in the business a view of how ethics of data is a potential way of segmenting and getting to the customers better product and making them feel comfortable and trust, and they will look at us as a trustworthy partner.
Got it. So people in this world, this sort of end state of segmenting based on perception of how the data is going to be used.
Yeah.
You end up potentially with cohorts of people that you want to be very careful about how you present your services and products to them that doesn't make it look creepy or unethical. And then there's a group of people that are totally fine with everything, and you can be very obvious about that you did this thing, therefore here's something in return.
And the biggest challenge is around transparency.
Yeah.
Because today, if you look at the data privacy notices, which again, we don't want to talk about GDPR, but if you get from your provider of service a long list, 3-4 pages of T's and C's, who is actually reading those? And how we make that message the most transparent possible, so we can actually get a very, very, articulated and possible consent. And today, talking too much with our friends in legal, they do their best, but the reality is that what you want is to have something that is in a page and is giving you exactly the perception or what you're getting from what you're giving me, and then people can actually abide to that and sustain that relationship. So
I agree.
It's a new world.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't a GDPR discussion, but I certainly think that that whole thing around transparency and if you're open and honest about what you're collecting, what your plans are to use it, and what the benefits is, I think arguably you can do anything, but you do need to be transparent, and not everyone gets that.
Maybe there is an opportunity for tooling here, because as I was saying, a responsible business maybe will provide their customer with a sort of an independent view or an independent tool that will allow them to read faster or understand faster or summarize better or match what they are about to do when they consent with their perceived expectation of their digital persona, which is what I would like to be on the net, let's say, from a data point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder, because organizations for a long time have had, corporate social responsibility, and it's covered, carbon footprint and the use of plastic bags and all this great stuff. I do wonder if down the line people will also judge an organization, and it probably happens now, but just not so overtly, whether one of the pillars of your social responsibility will be your ethical use of data and being very transparent about that with customers.
I think data, the way it's going, is basically becoming another dimension of reality. And I think it's going to be a natural extension of your expectation of what real is in terms of ethics. So I definitely expect that.
Data management is often misunderstood, and as such is left to technology or data teams to worry about. In fact, since data is pervasive, created by everyone and used by everyone in some way, shape, or form, it actually has a broad reach in terms of accountabilities and responsibilities for getting it right. From data teams to legal counsel, from technology teams to risk and compliance, from users of core business applications to creating advanced algorithms. The guests selected to represent this topic in this episode understand that and are helping to create positive stories around better data management and creating data excellence. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Hub and Spoken special series. I want to thank all our guests in the episodes curated on this edition and all other editions for their contribution to making this podcast so valuable and sharing their stories. I also want to thank our wonderful listeners across 126 countries and counting for listening, feeding back and sharing these episodes with other people to enjoy. We hope you find this series interesting, inspiring, and informative, so please do check out the rest of the series.